Hello there. Hello, Evelyn, Sharon, Mary, and Pauline, and I think there was Patricia. And then there was a flurry of names. I'm so glad you're all here. I'm Gildart, and this is Fireside Reading, where I sit in front of the fire every day and read a chapter or two of a book. And over the course of a period of time, we end up having read that book. It's a lovely part of my day, and I gather wonderfully that it's a lovely part of many other people's day too. I do it 5 Pacific live every day, and it's lovely that so many people tell me that it's a nice way for them to sort of end their working day, and people on the East Coast, it's sort of a signal of the end of the day. And that's the idea behind it. It's very easy. Just sit and listen and sit in front of the fire with me, just like they did in the old days. So today's a big day. We today are going to read the final chapter of A Passage to India. We've been reading A Passage to India since before Christmas, maybe even around Thanksgiving is when we started. This is a book that I've always meant to read. I find it fascinating. My mother grew up in India and was a sort of part of this whole world. My grandparents very much were involved in the railway there, and that was a big part of India. And there is a picture that I've been using as the frontispiece for this reading, which I don't know if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it's over there. It is a school that my grandmother started, and it's still there. They were living then in northern India. It's now Pakistan, but the Lady Griffin School for Girls is still there. You can find it online. I did a couple of years ago. I looked it up and realized it's still there, which is wonderful. So there were good things that came out of the English being there, as well as a lot of things that were difficult to overcome. And this book is in large part about all of that. And I've really enjoyed reading it for that reason. Also, it's beautifully written. All right. Welcome to... Oh, I just wanted to say one other thing, and that is that on Monday I will start reading the next book, A Change of Pace into a Murder Mystery, Lord Peter Wimsey's first book. Dorothy L. says is Whose Body? I'll start that on Monday. It'll be a relatively quick read, a change of pace, just sort of fun murder mystery. So join me for that, should you like. Welcome to a fireside reading of A Passage to India. This is the final chapter, chapter 37. Friends again, yet aware that they could meet no more, Aziz and Fielding went for their last ride in the Mao jungles. The floods had abated, and the Rajah was officially dead, so the guest house party were departing next morning as decorum required. What with the mourning and the festival, the visit was a failure. Fielding had scarcely seen God Bolet, who promised every day to show him over the King Emperor George V High School, his main objective, but always made some excuse. This afternoon Aziz let out what had happened. The King Emperor had been converted into a granary, and the Minister of Education did not like to admit this to his former principal. The school had been opened only last year by the agent to the Governor-General, and it still flourished on paper. He hoped to start it again before its absence was remarked, and to collect its scholars before they produced children of their own. Fielding laughed at the tangle and waste of energy, but he did not travel as lightly as in the past. Education was a continuous concern to him because his income and the comfort of his family depended on it. He knew that few Indians think education good in itself, and he deplored this now on the widest grounds. He began to say something heavy on the subject of native states, but the friendliness of Aziz distracted him. This reconciliation was a success, anyhow. After the funny shipwreck, there had been no more nonsense or bitterness, and they went back laughingly to their old relationship as if nothing had happened. Now they rode between jolly bushes and rocks. Presently, the ground opened into full sunlight, and they saw a grassy slope bright with butterflies. Also, a cobra, which crawled across, doing nothing in particular, and disappeared among some custard apple trees. There were round white clouds in the sky, and white pools on the earth. The hills in the distance were purple. The scene was as park-like as England, but did not cease being queer. They drew rein to give the cobra elbow room, and Aziz produced a letter that he wanted to send to Miss Quested. A charming letter. He wanted to thank his old enemy for her fine behavior 2 years back. Perfectly plain was it now that she had behaved well. As I fell into our largest Mao tank under circumstances our other friends will relate, I thought how brave Miss Quested was, and decided to tell her so, despite my imperfect English. Through you I am happy here with my children, instead of in a prison. Of that I make no doubt. My children shall be taught to speak of you with the greatest affection and respect. Miss Quested will be greatly pleased. I am glad you have seen her courage at last. I want to do kind actions all round and wipe out the wretched business of the Marabar forever. I have been so disgracefully hasty, thinking you meant to get hold of my money. As bad a mistake as the cave itself. Aziz, I wish you would talk to my wife. She too believes that the Marabar is wiped out. How so? I don't know. Perhaps she might tell you. She won't tell me. She has ideas I don't share. Indeed, when I'm away from her, I think them ridiculous. When I'm with her, I suppose because I'm fond of her, I feel different. I feel half dead and half blind. My wife's after something. You and I and Miss Quested are, roughly speaking, not after anything. We jog on as decently as we can. You a little in front, a laudable little party. But my wife is not with us. What are you meaning? Is Stella not faithful to you, Cyril? This fills me with great concern. Fielding hesitated. He was not quite happy about his marriage. He was passionate, physically again, the final flare-up before the clinkers of middle age, and he knew that his wife did not love him as much as he loved her, and he was ashamed of pestering her. But during the visit to Mao, the situation had improved. There seemed a link between them at last. That link outside either participant that is necessary to every relationship. In the language of theology, their union had been blessed. He could assure Aziz that Stella was not only faithful to him, but likely to become more so, and trying to express what was not clear to himself, he added dully that different people had different points of view. If you won't talk about the Marabar to Stella, Why won't you talk to Ralph? He is a wise boy, really. And, same metaphor, he rides a little behind her, though with her. Tell him also I have nothing to say to him, but he is indeed a wise boy, and has always one Indian friend. I partly love him because he brought me back to you to say goodbye. For this is goodbye, Cyril. Though, to think about it will spoil our ride and make us sad. No, we won't think about it. He, too, felt that this was their last free intercourse. All the stupid misunderstandings had been cleared up, but socially they had no meeting place. He had thrown in his lot with Anglo-India by marrying a countrywoman, and he was acquiring some of its limitations, and already felt surprise at his own past heroism. Would he today defy all his own people for the sake of a stray Indian? Aziz was a memento, a trophy. They were proud of each other, yet they must inevitably part. And anxious to make what he could of this last afternoon, he forced himself to speak intimately about his wife, the person most dear to him. He said, from her point of view, Mao has been a success. It calmed her. Both of them suffer from restlessness. She found something soothing, some solution of her queer troubles here. After a silence, myriads of kisses around them as the earth drew the water in, he continued, do you know anything about this Krishna business? My dear chap, officially they call it Gokul Ashtami. All the state offices are closed, but how else should it concern you and me? Gokul is the village where Krishna was born. Well, more or less born, for there's the same hovering between it and another village as between Bethlehem and Nazareth. What I want to discover is its spiritual side, if it has one. It is useless discussing Hindus with me. Living with them teaches me no more. When I think I annoy them, I do not. When I think I annoy them, I do not. When I think I don't annoy them, I do. Perhaps they will sack me for tumbling onto their doll's house. On the other hand, perhaps they will double my salary. Time will prove. Why so curious about them? It's difficult to explain. I never really understood or liked them, except an occasional scrap of God Bole. Does the old fellow still say, come, come? Oh, presumably. Fielding sighed, opened his lips, shut them, then said with a little laugh, I can't explain because it isn't in words at all. But why do my wife and her brother like Hinduism, though they take no interest in its forms? They won't talk to me about this. They know I think a certain side of their lives is a mistake and are shy. That's why I wish you would talk to them, for at all events you're Oriental. Aziz refused to reply. He didn't want to meet Stella and Ralph again, knew they didn't want to meet him, was incurious about their secrets, and felt good old Cyril to be a little clumsy. Something, not a sight, but a sound, flitted past him, and caused him to reread his letter to Miss Quested. Hadn't he wanted to say something else to her? Taking out his pen, he added, for my own part, I shall henceforward connect you with the name that is very sacred in my mind, namely, Mrs. Moore. When he had finished, the mirror of the scenery was shattered. The meadow disintegrated into butterflies. A poem about Mecca, the Kaaba of Union, the thorn bushes where pilgrims die before they've seen the friend they flitted next. He thought of his wife, and then the whole semi-mystic, semi-sensuous overturn so characteristic of his spiritual life came to end like a landslip and rested in its due place, and he found himself riding in the jungle with his dear Cyril. "Oh, shut up," he said. "Don't spoil our last hour with foolish questions. Leave Krishna alone and talk about something sensible." They did. All the way back to Mao, they wrangled about politics. Each had hardened since Chandrapur, and a good knockabout proved enjoyable. They trusted each other, although they were going to part, perhaps because they were going to part. Fielding had no further use for politeness, he said, meaning that the British Empire really can't be abolished because it's rude. Aziz retorted, "Very well, and we have no use for you," and glared at him with abstract hate. Fielding said, "Away from us, Indians go to seed at once. Look at the King Emperor High School. Look at you forgetting your medicine and going back to charms. Look at your poems. Jolly good poems. I'm getting published Bombay side. Yes, and what do they say? Free our women and India will be free. Try it, my lad. Free your own lady in the first place and see who will wash Ahmed, Karim and Jamila's faces. A nice situation." Aziz grew more excited. He rose in his stirrups and pulled at his horse's head in the hope it would rear. Then he should feel in a battle. He cried, "Clear out, all you Turtons and Burtons. We wanted to know you 10 years back. Now it's too late. If we see you and sit on your committees, it's for political reasons. Don't you make any mistake." His horse did rear. Clear out, I say. Why are we put to so much suffering? We used to blame you. Now we blame ourselves. We grow wiser. Until England is in difficulties, we keep silent. But in the next European war, aha, then is our time. He paused, and the scenery, though it smiled, fell like a gravestone on any human hope. They cantered past a temple to Hanuman. God so loved the world that he took monkey's flesh upon him, and past a Saivite temple, which invited to lust, but under the semblance of eternity, its obscenities bearing no relation to those of our flesh and blood. They splashed through butterflies and frogs. Great trees with leaves like plates rose above the brushwood. The divisions of daily life were returning. The shrine had almost shut. "Who do you want instead of the English? The Japanese?" jeered Fielding, drawing rein. "No, the Afghans, my own ancestors." "Oh, your Hindu friends will like that, won't they? It will be arranged. A conference of Oriental statesmen. It will indeed be arranged. Old story of we will rob every man and rape every woman from Peshawar to Calcutta, I suppose, which you get some nobody to repeat and then quote every week in the Pioneer in order to frighten us into retaining you. We know." Still, he couldn't quite fit in Afghans at Mao, and finding he was in a corner, made his horse rear again until he remembered that he had, or ought to have, a motherland. Then he shouted, "India shall be a nation. No foreigners of any sort. Hindu and Muslim and Sikh and all shall be one. Hurrah! Hurrah for India! Hurrah! Hurrah! India, a nation. What an apotheosis. Last comer to the drab 19th century sisterhood, waddling in at this hour of the world to take her seat. She whose only peer was the Holy Roman Empire, she shall rank with Guatemala and Belgium, perhaps. Fielding mocked again, and Aziz, in an awful rage, danced this way and that, not knowing what to do, and cried, "Down with the English anyhow, that's certain. Clear out, you fellows, double quick, I say. We may hate one another, but we hate you most. If I don't make you go, Ahmed will, Karim will. If it's 5,500 years, we shall get rid of you. Yes, we shall drive every blasted Englishman into the sea." And then he rowed against him furiously. And then, he concluded, half kissing him, "You and I shall be friends." "Why can't we be friends now?" said the other, holding him affectionately. "It's what I want. It's what you want." But the horses didn't want it. They swerved apart. The earth didn't want it, sending up rocks through which riders must pass single file. The temples, the tank, the jail, the palace, the birds, the carrion, the guest house that came into view as they issued from the gap and saw Mao beneath, they didn't want it. They said in their 100 voices, "No, not yet." And the sky said, "No, not there." The end. Thank you all so much for joining me. It's been a real adventure. One of the things I love about reading these books is they are all such adventures, and wonderful to see a little bit of that world. This was written in 1924. I'm very glad that we read it together. I'd love to hear any comments. If anybody wants to put them up on YouTube or on Instagram, please do. A complete change of pace in 2 days. Tomorrow I'm taking off, and then on Monday we will start Dorothy Sayers' Whose Body? Lord Peter Wimsey's first adventure. But until then, thank you all for joining me for this wonderful book, A Passage to India by E.M. Forster. And until we meet again, everyone, please stay very, very well.